Afternoon, folks. Chief Meteorologist Nick Lilia here, taking a look at your tropical update for September 19th of 2019, brought to you by Pine Belt Gutters and Remodeling. As always, hey, they do roofing too. There you go. Get your roof done. And hey, around here we don't get a lot of hail, but in places that do get hail, you may need to worry about something like that. As we head through the next couple of weeks, we are on the downhill slope. We've been talking about this last couple of days for hurricane season. We are waiting for the next name to show up, Karen. Hopefully we never have to use it. We're currently dealing with Jerry, Imelda, and even Humberto is still floating around out there. Into the Gulf of Mexico we go. There's Imelda, just still raining on the poor folks in Houston. The idea is that little backdoor front that's sneaking through our area right now, which is bringing a little bit of rain to the Pine Belt, will eventually pick this thing up and take it to the north and away from the poor folks in Houston who've seen somewhere between 10, 20, 30, and in some places 40 inches of rain. Out into the open Atlantic, we've got Jerry out here. We've got a wave here, another wave back in behind it, and another one coming off the coast of Africa here over the next about 48 hours. That over the next 5 days has a chance of development, though we'll get to that here in a second. Latest on Humberto up here, wind at 105 miles an hour, gusting to 125. I guess. They've got it down to a tropical depression by later tonight, and that is going to be quite the free fall if true. Quite the free fall if true. I'm trying to double check on these numbers before we got on the air, but this was a brand new 4 o'clock update, and so these were still the numbers that were available to us. But man, oh man, if that thing's going to be a tropical depression, whew! As we head down toward Imelda, which is a tropical depression, it's still floating around just off to the north of Houston right now and just still pegging Houston and out toward Beaumont just with tons of rain. They picked up in some places as much as 30 inches of rain between 10 o'clock last night and 10 o'clock this morning, which is just almost unfathomable considering the fact that they just had to deal with Harvey a couple of years ago, wind at 25 miles an hour. But like I've said this whole time, that's not the problem. The wind doesn't matter with this one. Where the wind is on the increase is with Jerry, wind at 90 miles an hour, gusting to 115 as this continues to move off to the kind of west-northwest. It's trucking 17 miles an hour. That's actually pretty good for a hurricane out in the middle of the Atlantic, anticipated to be a Category 2 for a couple of hours as we head through the day on Friday, and then back down to a 1. Before it makes the turn off to the north. It's going to interact with a little bit of dry air, a little bit of shear as it gets closer to Puerto Rico and the northern half of the and Greater and Lesser Antilles here, Leeward Islands, before it makes the turn just before getting to the Bahamas. Thank goodness those people need no more tropical systems, absolutely zero. All right, possible development time, 10 to 30% chance as that X drifts its way a little bit closer again to the Greater and Lesser Antilles this time of the year. The cruises are real cheap out there. This is why, because there's a lot of tropical activity oftentimes this time of the year. This wave is still floating around, but I will say that because we didn't see a big flare-up of activity through the overnight hours, that is a good sign that it's still basing a lot of its energy off of the daytime heat, and that's a good sign. It means it's not getting better organized. We don't have a lot going on in here, so only a 10% chance of development as we head through the next 2 to 5 days. Somewhere on the south side of, I should say, the Dominican Republic and Haiti, I almost said Puerto Rico, and out toward Jamaica, and as you make your way toward Cuba. European model actually flips this and says this is going to slide off to the north, though we'll talk about that here in a second. And then this next wave that you can see just coming onto the screen here, this next wave as it makes its way out into the open Atlantic with a 40% chance of development through the next 5 days, and the next 2. We're not too terribly concerned about what's going to happen. I wanted to show the spaghetti plots real quick with Jerry before we get into the other modeling that we've got, just to show that most of the spaghettis have it making the turn before the Bahamas. In fact, all of them do, and then kind of curly-cueing around and back off to the northeast. So while here in the Gulf of Mexico we have zero to worry about, mathematically speaking, in terms of the spaghetti plots, I always never say never with these things, so we'll keep tabs on it. All right, to the modeling we go. 700 millibar moisture, 850 vorticity map. Anywhere you get into the grayed out areas, that's, like I always say, the areas that are nice and dry in the mid-levels, which means you're not going to have any showers and thunderstorms, and thus no tropical development. Imelda lifts off to the north as we head through the day on Friday. There's Jerry. There's the first little wave into the Caribbean. The second wave is out here. The third wave is just coming off the coast of Africa. As we set this thing into motion through Saturday and into Sunday, you can see the wave does make it into the Gulf of Mexico as Jerry does make the turn to the north and back off to the northeast. Wave number 2 gets into the Caribbean, and wave number 3 just off of the coast of Africa there on the far side, right-hand side of the screen. This thing makes it into the Gulf, but kind of gets eaten up by dry air, and actually, sadly, in the latest run, moves its way toward Houston. The question becomes, with what gets into the Gulf of Mexico, is where is the weakness in that ridge of high pressure as it gets into the Gulf? If the ridge stays stout, it's going to ride right along the southern part of it and into Mexico. Where it finds a crack in the armor, that's where it's going to probably head north. And right now, the modeling is saying, well, that crack is going to be somewhere around Houston. A couple of days ago, it was in Mobile. A couple of days before that, it was New Orleans. A couple of days before that, it was Lake Charles. So somewhere along the northern Gulf Coast, the idea is that it's going to make the turn north as we head through the middle of next week. And it's going to meet up, I believe, with a little frontal boundary that's going to try and sneak through parts of the southeast. Now, the front itself, probably of little consequence. You're not going to get much of a temperature change. You're not going to get much rain out of it. Where you are going to get the rain and a little bit of a temperature change is wherever this thing decides to go north and kind of run into said front or get pulled north by said front. That's where you're going to get a little bit of rain and a temperature change, not because, oh, we're moving in cold air, but hey, it's raining, so it's going to be a little colder. Back in behind that, of course, you saw Jerry completely disappear. The secondary wave not really doing much. And the third one back in behind it, hanging out in the Atlantic and doing a fair bit. Then we see the second wave ends up kind of in the same ballpark as Brownsville, Tampico, Mexico, kind of in the southern Gulf of Mexico, Bay of Campeche area. The wave that was back in behind that stays out to sea and away from us, thank goodness. So there's your tropical update for September 19th of 2019, brought to you by the good folks at Pine Belt Gutters. So again, as of right now, thunder rumbling in the background, as you can hear. As of right now, along the Gulf Coast, tropically speaking, for now, for the next at least couple of days, we're looking pretty clear.